Welcome to Clandestine Cases, where every story unravels a new enigma waiting to be solved. Join us as we dive into Miss Marple and Bloodlines at Briar Hollow, a fan-made story created to celebrate the charm and brilliance of Agatha Christie's legendary detective. We'd love to have you with us on this thrilling journey. Share your thoughts, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if you spot any errors, do let us know. Your feedback helps us bring you even better mysteries in the future. Chapter 1. The Last Guest at the Midnight Train. The air was thick with a damp chill as the midnight train rolled into the tiny station of Ashford. The sound of its whistle echoed through the empty village, a haunting tune that dissolved into the rain-soaked night. Grey clouds filled the sky, hanging low as if mourning the dark events that were about to unfold. As the last of the passengers disembarked, shadows flickered against the yellow glow of the station's lights, their faces obscured in the twilight bloom. Inside the train's cramped compartment, the atmosphere was stifling. Havisham, the train's conductor, uneasy and fidgety, lit a lantern to peer into the last occupied compartment. "Mrs. Petunia Harrow," he called softly, his voice barely piercing the rhythmic patter of rain on metal. A shiver crawled up his spine when he found the door sealed tight, and a hollow silence greeted him. Fumbling with the latch, he hesitated, his heart pounding uncomfortably against his ribcage. No response. Of course, it wasn't unheard of for an elderly woman to doze off after a day of travel, but something about the stillness unnerved him. He banged the door lightly, calling her name again, and when it flew open at last, the sight within was dreadful. Mrs. Harrow sat slumped against the plush upholstery, a handkerchief daintily pressed to her chest, the other resting limply on the worn wooden armrest. She was lifeless, and in the dim lantern light, Havisham's blood ran cold. The compartment was registered with an uncanny calm, yet it was obvious the door had been locked from the inside. "Help!" he shouted, his voice cracking with urgency. "Someone call the police." Within minutes, a small crowd formed on the wet platform, the patter of downpour blending with muffled gasps and frantic whispers. Among them were three notable figures: Miss Jane Marple, an inquisitive retired spinster with a flair for detection; Sir Edward Carmichael, an aloof gentleman from London, with a reputation for jewels; and Mabel Finch, a sprightly young woman with a knack for socializing, her eyes darting as she surveyed the passengers. Miss Marple, always attuned to the undercurrents of human behavior, noted the tension rising among the small assembly. As the local constable arrived, a wiry man with a rain-drenched hat, he pushed his way through the throng. "What have we here?" he barked, peering into the compartment. It was a macabre scene, the bright lantern revealing Mrs. Harrow's pale visage, framed by her embroidered lavender shawl. "Old Mrs. Harrow seems to have succumbed during the journey," Havisham stammered, "but the door was locked from the inside. No one could have left without being seen." Miss Marple stepped forward, her keen eyes narrowing. Was there anything amiss? Any signs of struggle? "No," the conductor replied. "Her belongings appear untouched. Her purse is intact." "Perhaps her heart simply failed her," Sir Edward suggested, shifting restlessly. "Elderly and frail, it happens." Yet Miss Marple observed the unease settled in his eyes, contradicted by his nonchalance. Or perhaps it was something more calculated, she mused aloud, fully aware the truth lay deeper than the surface of this tragedy. Mabel Finch was fidgeting beside her, eavesdropping conspicuously, and it intrigued Miss Marple. The girl's fidgeting suggested a hidden knowledge. "Mabel, dear," she prompted, "tell me about your travels today." "Oh, just the usual," Mabel replied. Though her voice trembled, she couldn't meet Miss Marple's icy stare. "I had a delightful conversation with Mrs. Harrow. It was her first time out of the city in years. She spoke of a mysterious legacy." "Interesting," Marple continued. "A legacy? Was it about any family heirlooms?" "Heirlooms, debts, something about a lost brother. Oh, I wouldn't know all the details." Mabel's feigned ignorance dripped like golden syrup, but her nervousness only accentuated Miss Marple's suspicion. "I believe you would, dear," Miss Marple said, leaning in slightly. "You seem quite engaged with her after all." "Perhaps," Sir Edward interrupted, visibly annoyed. "She drank herself into a stupor, had a fit of some sort. I must admit, I preferred the smoke-filled compartments to the likes of—" "The likes of whom, Sir Edward?" Miss Marple quipped, cutting him off with a sharp glance. "Of meddling people and their gossip," he retorted defensively. "We're here to uncover a truth, not to carry dark insinuations," Miss Marple replied coolly, weaving through the strands of tension. "Now, if I may suggest, let us not dismiss the very real possibility of foul play. If I'm not terribly mistaken, I've seen Mrs. Harrow before." "Surely you jest," Sir Edward scoffed. "Indeed, I last saw her at a tea-room in London, and she tossed her share of barbs at the table." A sudden revelation flickered in her mind. "Let us not forget, one must consider, if anyone wished her dead." Sensing an inner frenzy among the passengers, an unsettling stillness took root, as if the train itself had absorbed their trepidations. Much had been revealed, yet very little of it made sense. "I dare say she was not merely a frail old woman," Miss Marple whispered to herself. Just then, a gust of wind rattled the wooden framework, announcing the arrival of the mist storm. And within its clamor, a chilling thought prickled Miss Marple's mind. The neglected purse, untouched, yet positively brimming with valuables, including a small silver locket resting on the floor, disappeared. A locket Mrs. Harrow had prized above all else. A potential theft, a miscalculated accident. The sensation of eyes upon her intensified. But one thing was certain. The maximum suspense of the night had yet to unfold, and hidden truths were ready to surface. Miss Marple tightened her shawl around her shoulders and braced for revelations, for this lonely night just became a web of tantalizing secrets. The locket would lead her to profound truths and potentially to a murder plot far more convoluted than she ever could have fathomed. And in that locked compartment, time had finally run out. But the mystery was only just beginning. Chapter 2. The letter that arrived too late. The rain fell in sheets as Miss Marple stood on the threshold of the Briar Hollow station's small post office, an envelope clutched in her gloved hand. The lantern struggled against the weather, casting eerie shadows that flickered against the damp walls, mirroring the unease swirling in her mind. The letter had arrived just moments ago, a cryptic, poorly worded message that sent a shiver down her spine. Miss Marple studied the envelope, noting its creases and the urgent scrawl of the sender's handwriting. The postmark suggested it had been sent from Barnstable a week before the tragic events aboard the midnight train. It was addressed to Mrs. Petunia Harrow, whose recent demise had left a pall over the quiet village. Only now, in the wake of the woman's death, did the contents of this letter seem to hint at a revelation that could unravel everything she had known. "Miss Marple," a familiar voice broke through her reverie, and she turned to find Mabel Finch approaching, drenched but determined. "Did you really mean what you said earlier about Mrs. Harrow possibly being murdered?" Mabel dear, I believe we owe it to Mrs. Harrow to examine every avenue, Miss Marple replied, her eyes not leaving the letter. This letter could be the first thread in a tapestry we have yet to unravel. Curiosity danced in Mabel's eyes. Is it about the legacy she spoke of? You were right. You can't dismiss the family's past when there's such a curious air about it. Indeed, Miss Marple sensed a hidden depth behind Mabel's enthusiasm, a spark of something darker lurking beneath her seemingly innocent demeanor. The legacy, Miss Marple echoed, or perhaps a warning. Would you care to join me in deciphering what lies within? With a nod, Mabel stepped closer, peering over Miss Marple's shoulder, as she carefully slit the envelope open. The sheets inside were frail, as if fearing to reveal the secrets they contained. To Mrs. Harrow, she read aloud, "Trust not those who linger in shadows, for light is far from their intent. Your brother wishes to reconnect. Take heed, for he is not all he seems." Mabel gasped, her brow furrowing. A brother? I thought she had no family. That's what everyone believed, Miss Marple murmured, her deeper instincts kicking in. But secrets often flourish in the unseen cracks of our lives. The timing of this letter is curious. It suggests communication from a source she likely wished to avoid. Yet, who could it be? Mabel's voice sharpened with intrigue. Do you think he holds something against her? Perhaps, Miss Marple pondered aloud, tapping a finger against her chin. More importantly, where might this brother be located? Or is it possible that this isn't merely about family reconciliation? The language suggests a hint of warning, possibly an invitation, one that was tragically left hanging. Mabel clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, glancing over her shoulder as if afraid the shadows were listening. I wonder if Sir Edward knows anything about her brother. They were both at the tea room when Mrs. Harrow spoke of the family. Sir Edward? Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly, recalling his earlier disdain for the gathering. He mentioned preferring the company of cigarettes and shadows to the likes of meddling souls. He hides more than he reveals, a man well acquainted with duelists, secrets, and whispers. Could it be that he too is part of this shadow world? Mabel posed, excitement flaring. It's a possibility, Miss Marple replied, tucking the letter back into its envelope, while her thoughts raced. She suddenly noticed something else. This was postmarked a week ago. Mrs. Harrow never received it in time. We must discover where it was sent from, to understand why. Mabel peered at Miss Marple with newfound determination. What should we do next? Perhaps we could start by interviewing the neighbors. They may have seen or heard something. Quite right, dear, Miss Marple agreed, but we must tread carefully. The mind of a thief or a cunning rogue often resides far too closely for comfort to those we trust. As they made their way down the rain-slicked street, Miss Marple's mind flooded with thoughts of Mrs. Harrow's last known days. Briar Hollow had always held a veneer of charm, its picturesque facade hiding a world of unturned stones and darkened alleys. When they arrived at the Finch residence, a creaky old manor encompassed by rose bushes, Miss Marple led the way inside. The warm interior was a stark contrast to the chill outside. Mabel's mother, Mrs. Finch, greeted them with a worried look. "Any news?" she inquired, her voice a hushed whisper. "Not news, but something intriguing," Miss Marple replied, motioning for Mabel to present the letter. "We discovered something Mrs. Harrow never got to read." "An unfinished conversation," Mabel added dramatically, handing over the letter. Mrs. Finch, her brow wrinkling, took it and read it, her expression shifting with each line. Who would send something so ominous? This man, her brother. Does he mean to imply wrongdoing? Miss Marple took the letter back, and scrutinized the handwriting. The elegance of such penmanship suggests a well-bred individual, perhaps even higher than she was momentarily led to believe. But before she could elaborate, a loud knock interrupted their discourse. Mabel moved to answer the door, revealing none other than Sir Edward, wet and weary-looking, yet elated by their endeavor. "I believe I may have some insights into Mrs. Harrow's past," he pronounced, but Miss Marple's attention was elsewhere. Something flashed in the light. Beside his foot lay a small, crumpled paper, the last remnants of a letter pasted onto the floorboards. "Sir Edward," she called, "before you proceed, may I suggest you retrieve that scrap? I suspect it may hold more significance than we realize." As he bent to scoop it up, the rush of thunder outside mirrored Miss Marple's escalating pulse. Confirmation awaited, and perhaps, within that scrap, lay the key to a hidden world interwoven within the mundane fabric of Briar Hollow. The evening held secrets, yet unfurled, and Miss Marple felt the gossamer threads of fate beginning to weave a more chilling tale. Chapter 3. The Face Behind the Mask. The rain fell steadily, drumming against the cobblestones of Briar Hollow as Miss Marple approached the imposing Finch Manor. Its grandeur was marred only by the dimness that seemed to cloak everything in a veil of sorrow. Just hours had passed since discovering the troubling letter, and now she found herself wading into the heart of grief, the Harrow family's resurgence into her life. A door creaked open, revealing Mabel's anxious eyes peering from behind the threshold. "Miss Marple," Mabel sounded breathless. "They're waiting for you in the parlor. But, oh, there's been an incident." "An incident?" Miss Marple quirked an eyebrow, brushing droplets from her hat. "Do tell, dear." "It's Mr. Charles Harrow, the brother. He fled from the house." Mabel's tone was filled with a mixture of bewilderment and excitement. Fled? Miss Marple's mind whirred, contemplating the implications. Did he go willingly? Or was he— No, he is distressed. There was an argument. Then he simply ran out into the storm. Miss Marple's thoughts raced like a stream swollen with rain, pooling at the edge of revelation. Very well, let's not delay further. We must speak to Mrs. Harrow and the others. Inside the parlor, an atmosphere thick with tension hung over the grieving family. The widow, pale and fragile, like a porcelain doll, sat rigidly in her chair, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Nearby, Mr. Harrow's elder son, Franklin, a tall man with receding hairline and a pinched expression, paced nervously, glancing at the clock, as if expecting time would offer some comfort or clarity. The youngest, Lily, barely more than a child, clung to her mother's side, wide-eyed and trembling. "Miss Marple, thank you for coming." Mrs. Harrow forced a smile that cracked at the edges. "It has been a difficult day." "I can only imagine, dear lady." Miss Marple stepped forward, her gaze absorbing every detail of the scene. "Where is Charles? I hear he's rather upset." At the mention of his name, a shadow passed over Mrs. Harrow's face. He needed air. The storm. It was too much for him. Her words lingered like the damp in the air, heavy with unsaid truths. Is he to blame for his mother's distress? Miss Marple's voice was gentle, but her eyes did not waver. Franklin snapped his head up, irritation flaring. What's that supposed to mean? Just because one uncle made the mistake of believing in family, do not divide us further. Forgive me, I only wish to understand, Miss Marple replied, with measured calm. Family dynamics, after all, can hide the darkest motives. Tell me about the argument. It was concerning the estate, Franklin began, the tension in his voice betraying his need to control the narrative. Our mother has been rather preoccupied since the horrible news. Charles believes she is not of sound mind to make decisions. Charles thinks a lot of things, Lily interjected bitterly. He's never spent a day caring for Mother while she was alive. Lily, Mrs. Harrow cautioned softly, this is not the time. Miss Marple felt a prickle of realization. The air thickened with accusations, swimming just below the surface. Perhaps we should inquire further into what exactly Charles intended to discuss with you. As if conjured by her words, the sound of the front door creaking open wove through the fabric of tension. A figure stood silhouetted atop the threshold. A soaked Charles Harrow, breathless and wild-eyed, the rain tracing lines down his face like tears of revelation. Charles, his mother gasped, relief intermingling with uncertainty. I was so afraid. Afraid of what, Mother? He countered, stepping into the room, soaking the immaculate rug. Afraid I'd uncover old secrets hidden beneath the polished surfaces. Merely a heated conversation, dear boy. Mrs. Harrow replied softly. There is no reason for dramatics. Dramatics, Charles hissed. You call warning your family about plotting a dramatic act? He turned, eyes ablaze with fury, fixing his gaze on his brother. You and your plans to sell this house. You want the past buried for good. Miss Marple observed this charged exchange closely. She felt the life in the room shift, as if palpable currents crackled through the air. Charles, she said, manner sharp, yet calm, your mother's life is at stake. Speak plainly. Charles paused, the agitation draining from his posture. You don't understand, he murmured, his fists unclenching. There was a letter. This morning before I arrived, I received a message from Barnstable, a warning addressed to Mother. I meant to discuss it with her, but... Enough, Franklin interjected forcefully. You're spinning tales now. If you have wit enough to be concerned, perhaps it should have been urgent to call help instead of pursuing storms. But Miss Marple caught the subtle shift in Charles's expression as he searched for words, a fleeting hint of dread washing over his face. I had no intention to alarm anyone. It was merely family business. Then I suggest that family business be aired, Miss Marple urged, leaning in. What was in the letter? Before Charles could respond, a sudden clap of thunder interrupted him. Lily gasped, her pulse quickening. Look, she cried, pointing at the window. The darkness outside swallowed the light, and as the rain cascaded down, Miss Marple noticed something peculiar, a figure lingering just beyond the haze of the storm. Squinting against the downpour, she recognized the familiar outline of a postal worker, hastily retreating, struggling to keep a large envelope dry under his arm. Forgive my intrusion, Miss Marple gritted her teeth, jerking her head toward the door. But there's a possibility of another revelation. I must follow that man. As she rushed out into the tempest, the echoes of the Harrow family's secrets rang in her ears, a warning, a letter, and a family unraveling under the weight of its own history. What lay within that envelope could very well tip the balance, drawing her closer to the heart of the mystery. A face behind the mask, revealing itself in grainy shadows and raw emotion, just waiting to be unveiled. Chapter 4. The Will That Was Never Signed. The rain beat down relentlessly against the cobbled stones of Briar Hollow, mirroring the turmoil brewing within the heart of Finch Manor. Miss Marple stood at the threshold, her keen grey eyes scanning the murky depths beyond the large window, where shadows danced and flickered, revealing the outlines of discontent and despair. Only moments earlier, she had rushed out into the storm, chasing after the postal worker. But he had eluded her, slipping into the obscured landscape of the night. Now, the air inside the house was thick with apprehension, layering itself over the conversations that buzzed uneasily about inheritance and loss. As she stepped back into the warmth of the parlor, Mabel, her faithful companion, was perched on the edge of a chaise, her fingers nervously twisting the fringe, while her eyes brimmed with trepidation. "Miss Marple, did you find anything?" she whispered, almost fearful of the answer. Miss Marple shook her head, slowly but with purpose, her heart racing not with the thrill of the chase, but with the trepidation of what lay beneath surface appearances. "He has escaped our grasp for now, but the errant letter is still buried beneath more pressing mysteries," she replied, her voice steady yet laced with gravity. "We must begin focusing on the matters at hand, among the Harrows. Time, as well as patience, will reveal much." Taking a moment to assess the room, she spotted Mr. Franklin Harrow pacing in one corner, his silhouette tense, while the fragile yet watchful Mrs. Harrow sat as if encased in a spell of mourning. Lily, meanwhile, appeared to shudder with every sudden thunderclap, her innocent eyes darting between her mother and brother. Miss Marple felt the tension coil like a spring, tight and ready to snap. Gathering her resolve, she approached Mrs. Harrow and held her gaze, absorbing the remnants of grief etched into her features. "I understand today has been a tumultuous one," she began, "but it's imperative to clarify the nature of the estate. Did your late husband leave behind a will, a document specifying any intentions regarding his inheritances?" Mrs. Harrow blinked slowly, as if trying to comprehend the prospect. "A will? Yes, there was discussion about it," she murmured. "He intended to redo it. He mentioned it just days before. Her voice faltered as pain lanced through her. "But I've not seen it. I cannot recall if it was ever signed." Franklin scoffed from the shadows, his frustration spilling forth. "How could you be so forgetful, Mother? It speaks volumes of your state of mind." "Enough," Miss Marple interjected softly. "We need to tread carefully around this topic, for chaos can often disguise itself as familial love." "What does it matter, Miss Marple?" snapped Franklin, his irritation boiling beneath a facade of propriety. "What good will a will do us now?" "Franklin, let her speak," Mabel interjected, sensing the rising tide of anger. "Perhaps Mrs. Harrow remembers more than she realizes." "You think?" Franklin scoffed. "Hardly. Mother has always been lost in a daze of emotional whims. It was only a matter of time before our family was dragged through the mud." "Be careful, dear boy," Miss Marple warned. "These sentiments can appear as an ulterior motive." She then turned her attention back to Mrs. Harrow. "Tell me, if you would, did your husband mention who he may have intended to be the beneficiaries of the inheritance?" Mrs. Harrow's brow furrowed, drowning in anxiety. "He said something about dividing it equally among the family. I think he meant—" She trailed off as a sudden understanding ignited within her. But Charles had concerns. He worried about debts, about keeping this place running. There were times he insisted on selling. Thunder rumbled ominously, and Miss Marple felt every eye upon her, expectations thick enough to cut through the gloom. "May I ask if anyone has seen Charles in the last hour? Surely he would have returned by now." No sooner had the words left her lips than the door swung open to reveal Charles, soaking, wild-eyed and panting, as if he'd braved the tempest himself. "Miss Marple, you have to listen. I know where the will is." The family collectively gasped, their hearts pounding with newfound hope and suspicion alike. Miss Marple moved closer, her heart racing, as he confessed, "I found a document. This morning, it was hidden in the library behind a loose book." Before the incident, Franklin pressed, eagerness shimmering behind his irritation. Yes, before the tragedy, it mentioned who would inherit what, but it was never signed. I must find it before someone else does. His eyes were wide, reflecting desperation, and yet an undercurrent of fear coursed through the tension in the room. "Charles, calm yourself," Mrs. Harrow pleaded, her voice breaking. "What do you mean it was never signed?" "An unsigned will can be contested easily," Franklin interjected, his voice sharp. "You can't simply hold on to a scrap of paper and expect it to mean anything." "Yes, but it could indicate his intentions," Miss Marple reasoned, her mind already charting a course through legalities and familial dynamics. A glimpse at the contents would provide insight into his thoughts, perhaps theories on the motivations surrounding us now. "By God, you're right," Charles said with sudden determination, his eyes locking onto Miss Marple's. "If I can find it in the library." But before he could finish, a chilling creak echoed through the manor, its wooden bones shifting and groaning as if echoing the very secrets they all bore. Miss Marple's instincts flared. "Stay here," she commanded softly but firmly. "I need to investigate." As she approached the library's door, silence hung in the air, thick and electric. Her heart raced as she stepped into the large, shadowy room, the flickering light from the fireplace casting eerie shapes across the spines of books, their titles, aged and enigmatic. Suddenly, a glint on the floor caught her eye. A small scrap of paper, crumpled and half-hidden beneath a dusty tome. Lowering herself to retrieve it, she sensed the world narrowing around her. The contents of that scrap could reveal more than intended. As she smoothed it out, the letters seemed to beckon her closer. "And if my intentions are bungled by my wife, I disown her. The house shall never belong." With a chill snaking up her spine, Miss Marple realized this could very well be the key to unraveling an intricate web of betrayal and treachery woven tight around the Harrow family. The room felt charged with energy, and she turned to leave, knowing this fragment held secrets that could explode the very foundations of familial loyalty. A sudden crash echoed from the entrance hall, a sound so violent that it sent ripples of fear throughout the manor. Without hesitation, Miss Marple dashed forward, heart racing, knowing that in each corner of Finch Manor, shadows inhabited the hearts of its inhabitants, waiting to reveal deeper truths that lay shrouded in darkness. The true nature of the will, never signed, never sealed, was but one layer of the enigma that awaited revelation. What fate awaited her, and what secrets may spill forth under the scrutiny of those desperate to inherit so much more than mere wealth? Chapter 5: The Vanishing Heir. The distant echoes of thunder punctuated the heavy silence hanging over Finch Manor, a deep rumble that seemed to reverberate through the very bones of the house. In the parlor, Miss Marple, her expression holding a mixture of concern and curiosity, turned to face the assembled family, who was still recovering from Charles's startling announcement about the will. A palpable tension crackled in the air, yet before the implications of his words could sink in fully, a new calamity struck: the unmistakable absence of Charles himself. "Where has he gone?" Lily spoke, her voice trembling. The young woman had been observing her brother with an air of confusion that shifted to panic as the clock struck the hour. It felt as though time had conspired against them, ringing hollow notes that echoed through the room. Mrs. Harrow, still caught in the depths of grief, and despair, looked from one face to another, her brow furrowed as fear clawed at her features. "He was just here, wasn't he? He said he had to find the document," she murmured, her voice cracking. "Oh, Charles." Franklin, his impatience evident, threw up his hands. "It's a stormy night, Mother. He's a grown man. He can look after himself. Surely you must think logically." "It's not just the storm," Miss Marple interjected smoothly, her voice carrying a stern yet soothing quality. "There is far more at stake than the weather. Charles's absence must be investigated. Surely he wouldn't venture out into the tempest without a cause." Without waiting for further discussion, Miss Marple strode toward the door, her resolve surging as she stepped into the dismal night. The rain fell in sheets, obscuring her vision, but the glimmer of determination paved her path. Behind her, Mabel caught up, her expression a mix of concern and loyalty. "Miss Marple, are you certain? It's treacherous out there." "Trust me, Mabel," she replied, her tone unyielding, yet soft. "If we do not locate Charles quickly, we may find ourselves embroiled in a far more sinister web than we currently imagine." Navigating through the chaos of rain and wind, they made their way to the library where Charles had last been seen. The heavy door creaked ominously as Miss Marple pushed it open, searching the candlelit space as the flickering flames cast dancing shadows against the walls. "He must have sought refuge in here," she murmured, scanning the room. A sudden movement out of the corner of her eye caught her attention. A loose book on the shelf, its spine slightly ajar. Intrigued, she approached and found not only the tome, but also a small, crumpled piece of paper tucked within its pages. Carefully she extracted it, her heart racing as she unfolded the fragile note. Scrawled in hasty handwriting were the words, "Beware the pawns, they move in silence." Before she could ponder the note's meaning, Mabel gasped behind her. "Miss Marple, look," she exclaimed, pointing to the window. Outside, the downpour raged ever harder, and in its chaotic dance, a figure stumbled through the fog and shadows. Could it be? Miss Marple hesitated, her instincts finely honed. She recognized the silhouette as that of Franklin Harrow, running towards the manor, drenched and wild-eyed. "Franklin," she called, waving him over as he approached, breathless. "Have you seen Charles?" he asked, his voice laced with urgency. "He's missing." "Quite the alarming coincidence, don't you think?" she replied, her suspicion growing. "You were just inside the house, were you not?" He hesitated, the hint of annoyance flashing across his face. "I was, but I thought perhaps he had come outside. I went to search the grounds." "Search the grounds? In such conditions?" Mabel interjected incredulously. "Why the urgent need to find him?" Franklin's face hardened. "Because he's become unreliable. If something has happened to him, it will reflect poorly on all of us." Or perhaps he was hiding something. Miss Marple mused, observing the hesitation in Franklin's posture. "What is it exactly that you fear could reveal itself?" "Fear? I don't fear anything," he snapped, but the tremor in his voice contradicted his bravado. "Or perhaps you fear family secrets coming to light, like the concealed will," she suggested, allowing her gaze to pierce into him, eliciting a nervous tick beneath his eye. Frustrated, Franklin turned sharply and headed back towards the manor's entrance. "You can remain here and entertain these wild notions, Miss Marple. I intend to find my brother." She followed, her instincts driving her forward as they entered the drawing room, now capturing the agitated atmosphere of a family on the precipice of disaster. Lilting whispers of discontent filled the space. The air felt heavier, charged with unspoken words. "Have you found anything, Miss Marple?" Lily asked, her voice almost desperate as she sought reassurance. "Only hints." Miss Marple's mind raced through the possibilities. There lay uncharted territories in Franklin's motivations. The scrappy note beckoned at her thoughts, but it was the notion of Charles that weighed heavily on her. "We must search for Charles together. He bears the key to unlocking this entire puzzle." As fate would have it, her attention shifted towards the mantelpiece, where the remnants of a half-torn envelope lay littered amongst the clutter. A flash of recognition sped through her. Beneath the damp paper, 2 initials, C.H. Miss Marple leaned closer, her breath hitching, as realization dawned. The pawns move in silence. She pondered aloud, piecing together the fragments of a far more intricate game at play than she had ever anticipated. Could these initials be linked to Charles? If he was a pawn, what manner of game was being played? The question loomed, heavy and dark. Just as she began to lead them outside, a chilling shriek filled the air. A sound so harrowing, it silenced the rain for a fleeting moment. They turned to face the source, dread pooling in their stomachs. Franklin's expression had devolved into sheer horror as he pointed towards the garden. "It can't be. No, not him." "Charles," Miss Marple gasped, clutching Mabel's arm tightly. There, illuminated beneath the flickering luminance of the lanterns, lay a body crumpled against the sodden earth, the figure unresponsive, and shadows of uncertainty clouding their minds. The storm raged on, but for Miss Marple, the tempest was inside her as, well, hearts raced with questions, uncertainties now rapidly intertwining with fear. What had transpired? And more importantly, what dark truths awaited them now with the vanishing heir? Chapter 6. Echoes of a Forgotten Past. A shiver chased its way down Miss Marple's spine as she and Mabel stood at the edge of the garden, staring at the still form on the ground. The heavy rain poured relentlessly, mixing with the sobs echoing from within the manor. Charles lay sprawled in anguish, the coldness of the earth seeping into his bones. But now they needed more than sorrow, they needed answers. Miss Marple leaned closer, her keen observation unmoved by the shock of the scene. A quick glance around revealed little. Only the whispered wind and the flashes of lightning above delivered a stark reminder of the tempest raging above. "Mabel," she said, her voice steady and measured, "we should examine the area, look for anything that might have been overlooked." Together, they approached the edge of the terracing, paying close attention to the way the ground churned in the muddy rain. It was then that Miss Marple crouched, brushing her fingers over a nearby blossom half buried in the dark soil. "Look here," she murmured, as she dug slightly, uncovering a small weathered photograph. It was posed, yet emotion flickered on the faces of those captured, people long forgotten. Mabel gasped, her wide eyes brimming with startled surprise. "Is that? But who are they?" Obscured by mud, most of the photograph was obscured, but the image still told a story. Miss Marple delicately brushed away the filth, revealing the portrait of a woman with a striking resemblance to Lily, standing beside a man whose likeness to Charles was unmistakable. A date in the corner, 1918, clung to the tattered edges, whispering of a past entwined with their present. "Extraordinary," Miss Marple whispered, her usual composure now wrapped in contemplation. The rain battered around them. Yet, in that moment, time stood still as connections began to form in her mind. What do you suspect this means, Mabel? A family secret? A long-lost connection? Mabel shook her head, her brow furrowed in confusion. But why would it be here? What could this have to do with Charles's fate? Understanding the connections is paramount, Miss Marple stated firmly. Lily's distress could be deeply rooted in more than mere inheritance. As they secured the photograph within a protective pocket, the sound of hurried footsteps disrupted the evening. Franklin appeared at the entrance of the manor, his disheveled hair framing a face twisted by anxiety and agitation. "What are you doing out here?" he snapped, angst betraying his bravado. "We must get Charles inside. You're adding to the chaos." "Mistrust is a dangerous game," Miss Marple replied, unfazed by his outburst. "We discovered something of interest. The past has a way of overlapping with the present." "What can you possibly know about the past?" "Focus on the present, Miss Marple," he barked, but his eyes betrayed an underlying fear, an awareness that perhaps he could not control the very tides of history spilling into their lives. Miss Marple took a step forward, her voice slow but resolute. "You speak as if history is of no consequence, Franklin. But it shapes our actions, our decisions. Why, this photograph suggests ties that could complicate matters far beyond Charles's untimely demise." "What are you implying?" he demanded, crossing his arms defensively, hands balled tightly, betraying hidden insecurities. "That perhaps buried pain and long-hidden familial connections have deepened the rift amongst you? Might there be an unresolved grudge or a forgotten love that could somehow connect the threads of this tragedy?" The tension thickened, the scent of rain mingling with unspoken truths. Franklin shifted uncomfortably, as if Miss Marple had revealed a secret he had long kept, and she read the flicker of discomfort in his eyes. "You presume to understand my family, but you know nothing of our struggles. This is no fairy tale. Our history is marred with disloyalty and envy. Indeed, history doesn't merely recount the past, it lays it bare before those reluctant to see," she said, her gaze holding firm. Mabel looked between the two, sensing the gravity of their exchange, as though they stood upon the precipice of obscured truths. "Enough of this," Franklin retorted, his voice rising in pitch, desperation curling at the edges. "You'll only sow discord before we've learned why Charles is gone. Come inside, we can't linger here." "Perhaps you're right," Miss Marple conceded, but before she stepped back towards the entrance, a passing glimmer caught her eye, shining from the corner of the garden. Just at the base of the ivy-covered wall, a thread of silver among the dense foliage, a locket clasped tightly as though guarding its secrets. Kneeling, she pried it from the earth and opened it delicately. Inside, the familiar faces of the woman and man from the photograph gazed back. The sight was chilling, a trifecta revealing links not just across time, but hearts. A familial connection once washed away, now re-emerging from the shadows. "Mabel, look! This ties Charles to that woman," Miss Marple exclaimed. "Could this be a lost sister, or perhaps an affair that spiraled beyond the family's comprehension?" The sudden gust of wind howled wildly around them, echoing the turmoil of revelations stirring in their hearts. Yet, Franklin's face twisted darker at the revelation, the faint beginnings of fear settling into his skin. "I warned you to leave it alone," he shouted, hands trembling, now fists clenched defensively. "These are things better forgotten." But Miss Marple's mind whirred like clockwork, deductions clicking into place. Forgotten, perhaps, but not without consequences. Each person entwined within this family carries a burden passed through the ages. Before more could be said, a distant rumble reverberated even louder, a mix of nature's anger and the storm's chaos, the very epitome of the looming disaster they were embroiled in. With one final glance back at the locket cradled in her hand, Miss Marple felt a powerful surge in her soul, a deepening system of connections to unravel. Discovering the past is crucial, she proclaimed as they moved, dread manipulating the air around them. This family's history, once hidden from view, shall become the lens through which we peer into the heart of this tragedy. Prepare yourself, for the echoes of a forgotten past can resurface, and they might just reveal the clarity we seek. As they hurried back through the yet steady downpour toward the manor, little did they know that the warning was not merely an observation. It was something that would soon strike dependably. And with it, chaos, yet again sweeping through the very corridors of Finch Manor. Chapter 7. A Whisper from the Dead. The tension clung to the air like the humidity that enveloped Finch Manor, making it nearly unbearable. Miss Marple stood in the drawing room, the rain drumming relentlessly against the window, an insistent reminder of nature's fury. She could still picture the lifeless form of Charles in the garden, the storm beyond reflecting the turmoil within the family. It was as if, amidst the tempest, whispered secrets raged against the silence of the manor, urging her to listen closely. As whispers of regret wove through the air, Miss Marple's instinct compelled her toward the antique writing desk that sat brooding in a corner of the drawing room. Its heavy wood bore scars of age, a testament to burdens long carried, and she felt the pull of its presence. Perhaps within its depths lay traces of the past, waiting to be uncovered. Mabel, still recovering from the afternoon's shock, hovered close. "Are you certain, Miss Marple? Shouldn't we let Franklin handle this now?" "My dear, secrets rarely reveal themselves willingly," Miss Marple replied, her eyes narrowing. "They often hide where we least expect them. It is critical that we delve deeper." She approached the desk. Dust motes danced in the flickering candlelight as she opened the drawer, peering inside. A tangle of old letters, quills, and faded stationery awaited her. Her fingers brushed against an intact envelope tucked into the back of the drawer. The faint scent of lavender teased her senses as she pulled it out, revealing the initial CH embossed on the front. "Mabel, look here," she exclaimed, her pulse quickening. The envelope was sealed with red wax, the impressions still crisp, suggesting it had not been opened in years. "What's so special about it?" Mabel asked, leaning closer while her curiosity piqued. "Letters often contain more than mere words," she replied, breaking the seal with care, each crack reverberating with echoes of the past. The paper inside was thick, yellowed with time, and as she unfolded it, the familiar, elegant script materialized. "Dearest Charles," it began, "I cannot bear to leave you like this. The truth must be told." Her heart raced as she read aloud. Each word struck the room with a visceral impact, painting unsettling images in her mind. "I fear for your future, marked by shadows of our ancestors. Forgive me for the choices made long before your birth. The burden has fallen on you to resolve the consequences of their actions." "Consequences?" Mabel whispered, her voice trembling. "But what actions? What could have happened that would involve Charles?" "The victims of history can shape those who come after them, Mabel," Miss Marple mused, her mind swirling with possibilities. Franklin's anxieties, Lily's despair. Was it all linked to these secrets? How curious that this was found hidden here. Why would anyone keep such a letter from their heir? Perhaps to protect him, Mabel suggested, her brow furrowing in thought, or to condemn him to repeat mistakes. The sound of swift footsteps broke their conversation as Franklin re-entered the room, his face pale and eyes wide with agitation. "What on earth are you doing?" he barked, panic threading through his voice. "Just examining the writing desk, Franklin," Miss Marple replied, holding the letter aloft. "A rather revealing correspondence addressed to your late brother Charles." Franklin's expression shifted from anger to fear in an instant, his voice strained. "Put that down. You shouldn't be meddling in matters that don't concern you. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Oh, I believe I'm beginning to," she said, her gaze unwavering. "There lies a fundamental truth that Charles carried, a hidden message perhaps, about familial ties and past mistakes. Is there something you wish to tell us?" His jaw clenched, and for a fleeting moment she saw the tempest raging within, the weight of a family legacy that bore down upon him. "History was my father's downfall, not my own." "You presume too much, Miss Marple," he spat, tense and defensive. "Come now, Franklin," she pressed gently. "To disown the echoes of your past is to ignore the consequences of the present. What mistakes are you so fearful of? Did we not already tread close to the heart of the matter?" "I'm not making an excuse. I'm warning you. Best leave the past buried. It's cursed," he shouted, panic creeping into his tone, a visceral fear simmering just beneath the surface. The rain continued its relentless assault against the windows, mirroring the urgency thickening the atmosphere. Miss Marple's thoughts churned with dread, realizing that the tensions could burst forth at any moment. Yet amidst that tension, a subtle notation in the letter caught her eye. "Interesting," she murmured, peering closer. "It mentions a location, a cottage, near the river." Further down, the handwriting trembled as if penned by a terrified hand. "You must uncover the truth before it is too late. The dead whisper their secrets." "What does that mean?" Mabel asked, her anxiety overlapping with excitement. Franklin's face twisted as he glared at the letter, his expression an amalgamation of mistrust and fear. "You're overreacting. It's just a letter." Miss Marple's gaze was resolute as she folded the letter, a sense of purpose igniting within. "No, Franklin. It is more than just a letter. This is a whisper from the dead that hints at a location. Answers yet to be unveiled," she announced defiantly. "We must investigate this cottage. Perhaps there lies a truth untold, one that could redefine everything we know about Charles and about your family." The wind howled outside, the creaking of the manor's frame intertwined with the raging storm, but Miss Marple felt an urgent fire within her, a flicker of hope amid the gathering darkness. "Prepare yourself, for the path forward is foreboding yet necessary." As she turned to leave, Franklin caught her arm. "You must leave this alone, Miss Marple." The warning in his voice was unmistakable, a simple command laced with desperation and dread. "But I cannot, Franklin," she replied slowly, pulling her arm free. "For the dead compel us to listen, and their whispers may expose the darkness hiding in plain sight." As she stepped into the tempest, the rain thrumming against her skin, Miss Marple felt the weight of the past converging with the present, layer upon layer, revealing a tapestry of deepening mystery. Ahead lay the river, and with it, a cottage, perhaps the final scene of this sordid drama. As she navigated the twist of gravel paths, she could not shake the feeling that she was drawing nearer to a revelation bound to upend everything, a truth that would surely awaken slumbering phantoms. Chapter 8. The Secrets Beneath the Floorboards. The midnight storm raged, reverberating through the very bones of Finch Manor. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind shrieked like a haunted spectre, further obscuring St. Mary Mead in its soaked embrace. Puddles curled in the shadows of the garden, glistening ominously. But inside, the atmosphere was laden with secrets that demanded to be unearthed. With Franklin's warning echoing in her ears, Miss Marple stood with determination, contemplating her next move. "Miss Marple, is it wise to be out here alone?" Mabel's voice trembled, her figure partially illuminated by a flickering candle held aloft. The glow cast soft shadows across her anxious features, making it clear how unsettled she was in the dim corners of the manor. "We have little choice, my dear Mabel. Too many uncertainties envelop this family like fog," Miss Marple replied, shaking her head. "Franklin is consumed by fear, and that fear often masks the truth far more effectively than a heavy curtain. We owe it to Charles and to ourselves to pry at the layers of this mystery." With grim resolve, she tiptoed through the drawing room. The resting shadows seemed to whisper as she approached the old grandfather clock that tumultuously marked the passage of time. In truth, the manor felt alive, each creak of the floorboards echoing her thoughts. Truly, if walls could talk, what tales they might tell. Outside, a rumble of thunder punctuated the moment, a timely reminder of the chaos swirling beyond the large stained-glass windows. But it was not the storm that captured her attention just then. It was the unsettling reflection of the letters she stowed away in her pocket, the dark histories hinted at within their pages. The more she pondered about the cottage near the river, the more critical the knot in her stomach became. What lay beneath its dilapidated surface? She shook her head to clear those thoughts. As she stopped before the writing desk, once more, the grip of the past had tightened, but in the recesses of her mind, she felt an unfamiliar pulse, the chill of destiny summoning her further into the manor's embrace. Perhaps within the depths of the estate, there lay answers obscured from plain sight. A phrase echoed, "The dead whisper their secrets." An urgency sparked in her as she began a systematic search. Descending the creaky staircase toward the manor's basement, a place where whispers gave way to shadows, she navigated through the dim corridor, meticulously running her fingers along the weather-beaten walls, searching for that secret entrance that would lead her to the truth. Her heartbeat quickened with each step. She could feel destiny pulling her forward. A sudden gust of wind from a partly ajar window caught her by surprise, shoving the door wide open. Drawing in a steadying breath, she slipped through, heart racing. The basement was plastered with dust and layered in a thick air of neglect. Cobwebs occupied almost every corner. To Miss Marple, this only served as a reminder of secrets buried deep. As she scanned the darkened room, Miss Marple's eyes landed on the ground, where a shadow fell oddly against the time-worn floorboards. There, at the edge of a rotting trunk, a space begged exploration. With the flicker of her candle, she articulated a hunch, reasoning that what lay under the boards might be worth investigating. Carefully sinking onto her knees, Miss Marple pried at the loose floorboard, its protesting groan a reminder of long-buried truths. The wood splintered slightly, revealing a small cavity underneath. A moment later, she extracted a leather-bound journal, its cover mottled and cracked, much like the skeletons hiding within the manor. Inside were pages filled with ink that danced under the meager candlelight, a hurried script flooded with desperation and regret. Although the ink had faded and aged, it was chillingly legible. "My dearest Charles," it began, echoing shearing pain. "The mistakes of our ancestors run deeper than the blood coursing through our veins. Enmities breaching sanity. Beneath the layers of sentiment lay a tale of betrayal and deceit, skimming through generations." As Miss Marple leafed through the pages, she found accounts of past misdeeds, hearts broken, and promises shattered. Each entry spoke of a looming confrontation between the family's forefathers and a rival household, muddying their bloodlines with vendettas long since forgotten, a cycle of vindication still lingering in the air. A passage caught her breath. "Never trust the silver locket. It binds us, yet curses us, hiding what we dread most." The entry continued, tracing the origins of an unrelenting curse said to haunt the covenant between the families. Yarn spun within the shadows of time suggested that Charles, as an unwitting heir, had become the central figure in a dark play that spanned decades. "What is it, Miss Marple? You look rather pale." Mabel's whispered voice was just behind her, having followed fearfully into the basement. "This journal may hold the very clues we seek, the dark spine of your family's story," Miss Marple replied, still transfixed, recognizing the powerful implications each word carried. Franklin's fears might hold merit yet. What he resisted was not merely of the past, but a dance of fate that sees no end, a curse that... Suddenly, a loud crash reverberated from upstairs, snapping them back to the immediate reality. The sound ricocheted through the hollow walls, resolute in its ominous intent. Startled, they exchanged wide-eyed glances as the air around them thickened with foreboding. "Should we investigate?" Mabel asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, but cautiously," Miss Marple cautioned, resolutely clutching the journal to her chest. This was far beyond mere echoes. It was now a call to confront the chaos brewing within. Each step toward the stairs surged with the rhythm of dread, her mind racing through the implications, linking the past to the alarming present. With Franklin's warnings heavy in her thoughts, Miss Marple steeled her resolve. "You can run from the past, but it always has a way of resurfacing," she murmured to herself as they ascended. The promise of new revelations intertwined with shadows all around them. Little did she know, within those shadows lay unforeseen dangers, and perhaps a single clue that would expose the deepest layer of the family's turmoil. Chapter 9. The Truth Buried in the Garden. The garden lay draped in a haunting silence, its lush blooms soaked and heavy under the relentless rain. The moonlight refused to pierce the thick clouds, casting the scene into an eerie twilight, where shadows loomed larger than life, and the air felt charged with secrets waiting to emerge from the earth. As Miss Marple stepped cautiously through the sodden grass, each squelch beneath her shoes echoed her rising anticipation. The events of the previous hour still clanged loudly in her mind. The journal's revelations, the ominous crash from upstairs, and the gravity of what lay just out of reach. Having gathered her thoughts, she felt a disquieting sense of clarity. The garden had long been a place of solace for the Finch family, yet now it seemed an expanse of hidden motives and wronged legacies. She remembered Franklin's panic-stricken warnings and his attempt to deflect scrutiny from the family's relationships. But Miss Marple only saw threads of incongruity woven into the tapestry of their lives. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught her keen eye. Squinting through the drizzling rain, she noticed a shadowy figure slipping into the garden, furtive and cautious, much like a ghost slipping from one graveyard to another. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice steady against the eerie backdrop. Caught off guard, the figure whirled, and familiarity gripped Miss Marple like a vice. It was Mabel, her hands twisting nervously at her side, drenched, yet undeterred. "Miss Marple, I thought you might be here," Mabel stammered, attempting to smooth her hair back into place. I felt drawn to this spot." Miss Marple regarded her, searching for underlying nerves. "Drawn, you say? Strange how the truth can often beckon in the most unexpected of places," she replied, tilting her head knowingly. "What is it you expect to find?" Mabel shifted anxiously, her cheeks flushed. "I don't, just the flora, I guess." But then she hesitated, eyes darting toward the shadowy corner of the garden, where overgrowth began to reclaim a disused path. Someone mentioned the family curse, that it tied to the garden in an old way. "Ah, the family curse," Miss Marple echoed, her brow furrowing. "A convenient excuse to shroud the truth, wouldn't you say? What if the garden has been privy to secrets beneath its very roots?" Just then, a distant rumble of thunder cracked, shaking the stillness of the night further. Without waiting for Mabel's reply, Miss Marple stretched out her arm, nodding toward the hidden path. "We must explore that way," she urged, a resolute gleam in her eye. With a mixture of trepidation and thrill, Mabel followed, trailing behind as they maneuvered through the dripping foliage. The air was thick and laden, each breath tinged with the scent of damp earth. The path dwindled before them, narrowing into an almost forgotten pathway that ultimately led to the overgrown remnants of a once elegant stone gazebo, a structure that could harbor tales of clandestine meetings and whispered confessions. As they pressed forward, Miss Marple halted, drawn by an anomalous thing on the ground. Her candle flickered below the shelter of the gazebo, illuminating a small, weathered locket. She knelt to pick it up, brushing off the muddy film, revealing delicate engravings that seemed familiar. "The silver locket," she murmured under her breath, the mention of Franklin's journal flooding her with newfound urgency. "Do you think it's important?" Mabel asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if the very air might conspire against them. "It is tied to an old narrative." "I'm almost certain of it," Miss Marple replied, examining the locket with unwavering focus. "This could belong to someone intimately entwined with the Finch family history." Just then, Miss Marple recalled a passage from the journal of bloodlines, betrayals, and the haunting mention of never trusting the silver locket. There is a deeper connection here, one that implicates the most unsuspecting of souls. "What do you mean?" Mabel asked, concern knitting her brow. "It's not always the shadowed figure or excitable spirit we ought to fear," Miss Marple posited, slipping the locket into her pocket as she rose. "Sometimes it is the bloom of trust that hides the thorns beneath." Just then, the quiet was shattered by the rustle of branches and the low murmur of voices echoing from the far end of the garden. Mabel gasped, clutching Miss Marple's arm, eyes wide and shimmering with anxiety. An instant later, a male figure emerged into the flickering light. The unmistakable outline of Franklin emerged through the dense undergrowth. He spoke urgently, but the words were lost beneath the drumming rain. Maintaining her composure, Miss Marple decided to tread cautiously closer, her heart racing as she listened, catching fragments of the conversation. "No more delays. The locket brings risks we must avoid." Franklin's voice trembled under an uncharacteristic strain, urgency radiating off him. But before Miss Marple could move in closer to uncover the truth, Franklin's formidable silhouette flickered as another figure joined him, a woman swathed in rain. Miss Marple barely caught her name amidst the chaos. "Franklin, surely you can see reason. We cannot let it happen," the voice called sharply, a tone Miss Marple recognized too well. "Mabel," Miss Marple murmured, her apprehension solidifying. This was no chance encounter. The heart of the matter lay buried in the garden, and she had only scratched the surface. As the rain continued to fall, drowning the secret soaking deep into the soil, a chilling realization settled within her. She was on the verge of unveiling more than just family history. A confrontation loomed, not in the dim recess of the manor, but in this very garden, where the truth had taken root. With a sense of dread boiling beneath the surface, Miss Marple steeled herself for what lay ahead, knowing full well that the heart of the mystery remained buried somewhere in the darkness, and she was determined to unearth it. Chapter 10. The Final Trap. Despite the lingering downpour that soaked Briar Hollow in a glistening veil, the atmosphere within the Finch Manor was electric with anticipation. The grand ballroom, filled with the aristocracy of the village, served as a shrine to the gala evening. Chandeliers glittered like stars, trapped within polished crystal, casting flickering shadows that danced along the walls as Miss Marple surveyed her surroundings. Each guest was adorned in their finest attire, yet beneath the smooth veneer of civility, the tension thrummed palpable as if the very air conspired against them. She felt the weight of the silver locket nestled against her breast, a grim reminder of what she had unearthed. Whatever secrets it held, it was time to draw the truth from its steely grasp, just as she planned to unmask hidden motives and unspeakable acts lurking behind painted smiles. "I do hope you've cooked up something delightful for tonight's festivities, Miss Marple," murmured Lady Grimsby with a feigned sweetness, stepping close, her eyes darting to the locket's slight glint. "One can hardly fathom how many envious souls lurk in shadows, waiting for a slip." "Indeed, my dear lady," Miss Marple replied, concealing the cool steel coursing through her veins. "But allow me to assure you, I'm more concerned about those who place too much faith in deceitful appearances, rather than what is served upon the table." Lady Grimsby's smile faltered for a brief moment, but she regained her composure quickly, retreating into a haze of murmurs amongst other guests. Miss Marple's intuition nagged at her. Tonight held the promise of revelations, though their sources remained obscured within the web woven by years of family secrets. Before long, the clamor of laughter echoed through the hall as the clock tolled 8. Miss Marple raised her glass, preparing to weave her words into the din. "May I have your attention, esteemed guests?" she called, her voice firm against the ambient chatter. The room quieted, heads turning toward her with curiosity. Tonight isn't merely an evening of celebration, but a pivotal moment in unveiling the truth that binds us all, the truth beneath the facade of respectability. A shiver flicked through the crowd, a palpable tremor in the air. "You see, a ghost walks among us," Miss Marple continued, born of betrayal past, seeking recognition in the still echo of this very estate. "Miss Marple," Franklin's voice cut through the tension like a knife, his eyes wild with apprehension. "What are you implying? You cannot seriously suggest an unearthly presence among us." "Perhaps unearthly means not always a spectre of the night, Mr. Finch," she replied, her gaze piercing, "but rather what haunts us, our actions, our choices. I believe the silver locket you so vigorously denied holds the key to that which has been buried between the Finch family and the Cabots of Briar Hollow." Gasps rippled through the assembly as the crowd shifted uneasily. Miss Marple allowed the moment to settle before she continued. Curiously, your family's history includes a long-suffered enmity, deep-rooted misunderstandings, and whispered promises that morphed into long-lingering curses. As the words traversed the room, vivid images of past grievances flickered in the guest's eyes, particularly Mabel's. Small knots of agitation clenched her hands. Knuckles turned pallid beneath the strain. And yet, Miss Marple pressed on, it is not derived from malevolence alone, but a shadow that has continued into the present. She fixed her gaze on Mabel, whose wide, anxious eyes told a tale of servitude and ambition concealed by loyalty. Miss Finch, are you not drawn to reclaim a legacy twisted by a curse? What do you mean? Mabel's voice trembled, and the air fell thick as silence descended. Drawn to uncover what your family surrendered. With the locket, she challenged, watching Mabel's face shift from fear to recognition. If that locket were here tonight, do you think? Mabel's gasp filled the void. It cannot be. Yet it is, she concluded solemnly, reaching into her pocket to produce the locket, now shimmering ominously under the ballroom lights. One of you must understand the weight it carries. The locket binds more than one's past. It has the power to reveal intentions buried with it. Suddenly, thunder rumbled outside, as if mirroring the turmoil spilling within. Enough of this charade, Lady Grimsby interrupted, her voice a whip of venom. You cannot toy with the foundations of our society over nonsense. Ah, but what if it is in that very nonsense that we find truth? Miss Marple countered, the tension between the two women crackling like static. Perhaps there lies more than just regret, a lust for power that casts shadows darker than one might expect. Lady Grimsby's mask began to slip, revealing cracks of frustration, while Franklin, sensing the tide shifting, stepped in. This is a mistake, Miss Marple. You know nothing of our history. No, Mr. Finch, it seems you forget that it was you who tempted fate. Perhaps your forefathers knew something about the locket, which remained unspoken for far too long. In the midst of the chaos, Mabel finally broke her silence, a revelation piercing through her hesitation. I found letters hidden beneath the floor, together with that journal you found. She locked eyes with Miss Marple, fury igniting in her expression. They spoke of a plan to reclaim power. Secretly, that involved mutual deception. Gasps rippled through the assembly again, the air charged with accusations. Just then, amidst the storm of voices, a low, cold laughter echoed, pulling the crowd's attention to a shadowy figure lurking at the ballroom's edge, someone utterly unexpected. Bravo, Miss Marple, the figure sneered, revealing an unnerving grin through the dim light. But you've merely scratched the surface of a game that is far from finished. Miss Marple felt the temperature drop as realization washed over her. She had stirred the cauldron of festering secrets, and the final trap was hastening toward a violent end. As the room's tension burst with fervor, Miss Marple prepared for the unpredictable chaos that hung thick in the air, longing for the moment when the truth would finally break free from the grasp of shadows lurking in the depths of Briar Hollow. The storm now raged outside, but it was the tempest within that she feared might swallow them all. Chapter 11. The confession no one heard. The storm howled furiously outside, rain slashing against the tall windows of Finch Manor like an angry spectre. Inside, near the embers of the fading fire, Miss Marple stood enveloped by a thick tension that prickled at her senses. The gala guests had descended into a tempest of accusations, their voices echoing feral in the grand ballroom. With whispers spiraling around her, like leaves caught in the wind, the detective felt a revelation teeter just beyond her grasp, ready to unwind the intricate web of familial deceit tightly wound around the Finch and Cabot families. Miss Marple's heart raced even as she held her composure, her keen eyes roving over the crowd. Franklin, agitated, paced nearby, torn between protesting allegations and hiding some darker truth. Lady Grimsby's presence loomed ominously, her veneer of patience evaporating like mist as the wild wind rattled the doors. Yet, the weight in the atmosphere leaned not solely on their words, but something deeper, almost primal, a shared history beckoning for resolution. Suddenly, Mabel's voice rang clear over the din, cutting through the murmur of chaos. "I found the letters," she shouted, trembling but resolute. All heads turned toward her, eyes wide in anticipation. They spoke of a conspiracy, a betrayal so vile it could ruin us all. The room held its breath, an almost sacred silence descending, until Mabel's words dropped like stones. "Each of us has been a pawn in a game, set long before we were born." Paired with a love story that twisted into ruin, Miss Marple whispered. For now the echoes of the past flooded back, weaving through her mind, a series of intimate whispers that hinted at duty and desire gone awry. The look on Mabel's face spoke volumes. She was both a captive and an architect, caught in the whirlwind of love and loyalty gone astray. Franklin blanched, his bravado waning under the weight of those revelations. "Nonsense," he spluttered, attempting to claw back some semblance of control. "You cannot possibly believe those letters mean anything." "You misunderstand, Franklin," Miss Marple said, though her tone held steely warmth. "They hint at a family secret that transcends mere misunderstandings. Your family and the Cabots were not merely rivals. They were entwined in a tragedy that could redefine everything we believe of your lineage. That locket belongs to someone whose very identity may hinge upon how tangled those ties run." The tension in the ballroom throbbed like a heartbeat, and it was at that moment that she noticed a solitary figure slipping through the shadows, a subtle movement that might have gone unnoticed by lesser observers. She couldn't be sure, but the glint of metal reflecting in the low light piqued her curiosity. Her eyes narrowed as the figure merged seamlessly back into the crowd, just another guest amid the storm. "Are you suggesting that our families were lovers?" Mabel's voice cracked, horror twisting her features. "And that this locket holds the key to what? Infidelity?" "Yes, Miss Finch," Miss Marple replied softly. "Infidelity that reshaped legacies. Love, indeed, can twist into something deadly when cloaked in secrecy. Each family sought to protect their own, yet failed to consider the ruin left in their wake." "I do not see how this all matters now," Franklin grumbled, crossing his arms defensively. "What relevance does such old history hold?" With the ongoing thunderstorm, matching the tempest of rising voices, Miss Marple stepped closer. "Old history has a tendency to resurface, Mr. Finch. We live in its shadows, unaware of the depth of its grip. Consider who has the most to gain. Who stands to lose from these revelations?" Before Franklin could respond, Lady Grimsby interjected, the sharpness of her tone cutting through the tension. "This is utter nonsense. To suggest history is more than mere coincidence is preposterous." But Miss Marple only smiled, a calmness washing over her. "Then allow me to untangle the strife for you, my dear lady. What if I told you that I know of someone who could unravel everything." At that moment, gasps rippled through the guests again, the whispers crescendoing as if they held their breath, waiting for the next revelation. As Miss Marple peered closer into the depths of the room, she caught sight of the mysterious figure once more, a woman cloaked in shadow, standing near the entrance. The rain cascaded against the window behind her, and a single tear slipped down the woman's face, her expression awash with yearning. "Who are you?" Miss Marple addressed her directly, breaking from the rising tensions between the guests. The room fell into an enigmatic stillness, everyone drawn to her inquiry. The woman hesitated for a heartbeat before stepping forward, drenched but lit from within, as though she were braving a storm of her own. I am Caroline Cabot," she breathed, each word simmering with gravity and sadness that mirrored the torrential night outside. "I was meant to deliver a message." "Then deliver it," Miss Marple urged, her ever-present curiosity urging her forward as the tempest outside stretched closer, melding the chaos within. "Show us. Demonstrate what we have collectively ignored. For time is a thief, and secrets held too tightly will condemn an entire line." Caroline's gaze flickered around the ballroom before fixing desperately on Franklin. "The locket was never meant to bring ruin. It bears the memories of love shared, and sorrow that, free from the chains of vengeance, could unite us. Anything else only prolongs the inevitable suffering that binds us." Franklin recoiled, the confession hanging uncomfortably in the air, a stark contrast to the low rumbling above. "What do you know of suffering, of love, when betrayal hides beneath every glance?" "I know everything," she replied, her voice unwavering, stronger now. "And it will cost us dearly if we do not face the past together." The outpouring of emotion hung sterilized under the grand chandelier, and Miss Marple felt a surge of clarity. There, hidden beneath the surface of disdain and rivalry, lay a truth interwoven with desperate love and familial bonds. Something was unraveling, a confession that might set them all free. In that moment of fraught revelation, Miss Marple caught the glint of metal in Caroline's hand. A locket, still hanging ominously between them, revealed images peeking through the fragile closure, whispers of loyalty trapped in an age-old curse. As thunder rumbled above, the somber air coiled tight, leaving Miss Marple poised on the cusp of discovery as she beckoned the gathering toward Caroline, a conflation of histories jostling against the despair of the present. "Together," she urged, her voice steady against the rising storm. "Only together may we forge the clarity we need before another heartbreak urges us deeper into secrets more dangerous." In that electrified moment, the winds swirled outside, cradling old grudges along their path. As the storm swallowed their cries, yet one prayer still lingered in the air. What truth lay ahead, and who among them would confess before it was too late? With Caroline's words hanging heavily above, Miss Marple braced against the tightening fray, knowing that every thread, unraveled, now brought her closer to the astonishing finale awaiting just beyond the veil. Chapter 12. The Secret Beneath the Staircase. A single strike of lightning illuminated the dimly lit corridors of Finch Manor, casting eerie shadows upon the walls that seemed to dance in tandem with the rumble of thunder. The storm outside raged on, mirroring the tempest within the grand house. Miss Marple stood at the base of the staircase, her heart heavy, yet her mind racing as a dark thought took root. It was almost laughable how easily she had dismissed the folklore that had been whispered among the locals about the ancient secrets buried within the Finch family estate. But as the words of Caroline Cabot echoed eerily in her mind, she felt compelled to investigate the hidden depths of the manor itself. "Miss Marple." The voice of Mabel came from behind her, breathless and insistent. "You mustn't wander off alone. I've found something critical." Turning, Miss Marple watched as Mabel hurried down the hall, a glimmering object clasped tightly in her fist. The air thickened with anticipation. "What is it, dear?" Miss Marple prompted gently. A flicker of hope ignited in her heart. Mabel paused, a flicker of hesitation clouding her features, yet the urgency of her grip on the small object spoke volumes. "I found this in the library, hidden behind a loose brick near the fireplace," she revealed, extending her hand to display a tarnished gold key. The weapon of her tremor seemed incongruous for such an important discovery. It was wedged deep, yet I couldn't help but feel it belonged to something more. A door, or perhaps a hidden compartment. Miss Marple accepted the key, turning it over delicately between her fingers. "Did you notice anything else in the library? Perhaps a loose shelf? Or an old trunk that appears untouched?" she inquired, her mind weaving in and out of possibilities. "Just the journal we discussed earlier," Mabel replied shakily. "But it was the way the walls seemed almost too perfect. You know the kind, with the careful slope of dust, as if it had not been disturbed in ages." Then it hit Miss Marple. The tales of secret compartments and hidden rooms beneath the staircase that threaded through the Finch family history like an undercurrent. "Let us examine this together, shall we?" she replied, feeling invigorated by the promise of discovery. They moved cautiously to the staircase, the rich wooden steps creaking ominously beneath their weight as they climbed. The air thickened with a palpable tension, a charged mix of excitement and trepidation at what they might uncover. As they ascended, Miss Marple noticed a glint of metal reflected in a different shadow, a momentary flicker that vanished just as quickly, like a whispered secret. "Do you see that?" Miss Marple pointed slightly, her heart quickening. For an instant, she felt they weren't as alone as they had thought. Mabel followed her gaze, but found nothing save for the darkened corners of the corridor. "Perhaps you were mistaken, Miss Marple, or the shadows play tricks in these dim light conditions," Mabel suggested, though her voice trembled. "Perhaps," Miss Marple mused, although her instincts urged otherwise. She pushed open the creaky door that led to the attic space on the upper floor. Dust motes danced in the silvery haze, filtering through a small pane of glass. "Now," Miss Marple began, steadying herself, "let us see what lies here." At her feet lay a disheveled trunk, its leather cracked from age, nestled beneath a thick layer of dust. Mabel stepped forward and began to clear away the rubble, revealing ornate carvings that suggested it could have once housed precious relics of the past. As Miss Marple examined the key against the trunk's lock, her eyes darted across the room, taking in every detail. "What do you think? Do you feel this could hold something vital?" "Only one way to find out," Mabel urged, anticipation mixed with fear, propelling her forward. The key slid seamlessly into the lock, a small click resonating in the cavernous space, as if the house itself had exhaled. With a gentle push, the lid creaked open, and there lay a collection of letters, yellowed with age, tied neatly with a faded ribbon. "Look here," Miss Marple whispered, her pulse quickening as she delicately brushed her fingers over the brittle pages. "These letters, if they are what I suspect, they could very well spill the secrets of Briar Hollow." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the attic door. Miss Marple quickly pushed the trunk shut, her instincts honed to alertness. They barely had time to exchange anxious glances before the door swung open, bathed in the emerald glow of lightning. "It's only me," came Caroline's voice, flooded with urgency. "I saw you leave the ballroom. I cannot let you uncover what's hidden here." Miss Marple rose to her feet, the weight of discovery pressing down on her. "Caroline, if you're truly here to assist, then you must understand that this history is larger than ourselves. If we do not uncover the truth, history will repeat its tragedies." The storm outside flared, reinforcing the charged atmosphere. Caroline's eyes darkened, hinting at a haunting burden. "It is my family's shame that has outlasted the years. Some truths simply must remain buried, lest they awaken the ghosts of Briar Hollow." "That may be so," Miss Marple countered, her voice imbued with calm authority. "But there remains a murderer among us who hopes to keep those ghosts alive." The revelation hung in the air, the thunderstorm outside, crashing as if drawing in the tumult of unanswered questions. Caroline clutched the door frame, battling with her emotions as she turned to the stairwell. "You cannot go digging deeper. You risk everything." Miss Marple glanced down at the letters, knowing their potential to reshape the narrative forever. "Perhaps we will risk more than you realize, Caroline," she replied, her voice steady yet strong. The clock struck midnight, drowning out their voices as the wind howled around them. Then a realization hit. Mabel's earlier words echoed through Miss Marple's mind. The door, Caroline's fear of uncovering secrets. Could it be tied to something deeper? The true motive of the murderer, and of who stood to benefit most from silencing those that spoke of them. But the key shared between them hung suspended in her thoughts, a mystery begging for resolution. Just then, another clap of thunder shook the house, causing a surge of adrenaline to pulse through Miss Marple's veins. She knew the pieces were tripping into place. Each letter they uncovered could expose a plot more twisted than they had, until now, believed. Suddenly, as another blast of lightning illuminated the room, Miss Marple caught another glimpse of the silvery object reflected in the shadows, a pendant improbably familiar. Caroline mounted a stair before taking off down the corridor, leaving Miss Marple and Mabel rooted to the spot, the trunk calling to them, secrets pressing ever closer. Missy Marple's resolve solidified. "We must follow her, Mabel. The storm may be wild, but we have ventured thus far. The answers lie deeper still, echoing beneath the staircase. Our truth awaits just beyond." With the thunder gnashing outside, Miss Marple and Mabel raced after Caroline, propelled into the embrace of their fate, the pulse of a chilling reality thrumming beneath the surface. The final act loomed dangerously close, but what awaited them could unravel history, forever changing the tranquil face of Briar Hollow.